What about race? Do you ever touch race in your public commentary?
Yeah, it's a great question. I stopped doing it in 1991 when I was profiled, that is, media profiled, not police profiled,
The good kind of profiling.
the good kind of profiling, in a PBS documentary called Breakthrough, subtitled The Changing Face of Science in America. And I was one of about a half dozen people who were profiled. And I think we were filming as early as 91. It might have aired in 93. And that was the last time I agreed to do something where my skin color would be the reason why I was asked to participate. There have been two occasions since then that have been YouTubed. One of them was at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in Maryland, where they have a summer program of graduate students, and they invited me to just chat with them about my experience in graduate school. And I can't do that without mentioning race. And so, but that got clipped, and it's on YouTube, and it was, many people caught it. One other time, I was at a conference on, what was it? I forgot the name of it. But someone at the end asked a question: what about women in science? What's going on there? How come we don't see the numbers? And on the panel, I happen to be the only scientist. So I lead off by saying that while I'm not a woman, I've been black all my life. And so here's what I have encountered and the resistance that I've seen, and that I'm here where I am because of an energy level to overcome the low expectations or the forces against me that are held up in the quest for me to achieve my goals. So if that's any indication of what women are experiencing, we have a long way to go. And you want to talk about whether there's some genetic reason or hormonal reason why women are in one field or another. Whatever that conversation is, you can't have that conversation until you have demonstrated that the social forces have been equalized. And I don't think people have been able to demonstrate that yet. So that's what I said. Now watch what happened. That got YouTubed and it was up 7 years ago. 7 years ago or so. Then somebody reposted it like a year ago. And then it went viral, okay? It went, like, millions and millions of people saw it, because there I am talking about race. And they hardly have anything else of me talking about race, right? Because this is not what I do. And then on Fox News, the 5 at 5, they've got some thing there, my name came up, and they all were reacting to me and my name, and it's Fox News, so it's news theater. And one of the guys says, "Tyson, I hate that guy. Every time I turn around, he's talking about race, and he's talking about how he had to struggle." And I'm thinking, oh, he must have only seen this one video and presumed that that's the majority of my output, when of course it isn't. So lately I just simply steer clear. I'm a scientist, and that's what we deal with.
Right. I'm tempted to steer you into it. Because I want to hear.
That's because you're Sam Harris. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to, be the pebble in the shoe, the thorn in the thumb. But go on.
Because frankly, I would really want to hear what you think about race. You obviously have a unique vantage point, being one of the very few famous black scientists, and race is becoming. The fact that the last thing you said about it was 7 years ago suggests to me that there's a lot you might say about this moment now in our public conversation. And when you look at the kind of pendulum swing the liberal community and college campuses have executed of late, where you have a kind of political correctness on campus where it's just every conversation about this and other charged topics is just so heated that now you, in many cases, you can't even have the conversation. You have people just shouting down any unpopular opinion.
It's racism and feminism, both almost together in lately. Yeah.
So it's, as an educator, it would be very interesting to hear your take on this.
My sense of it is the loudest statement I can make is to not ever mention it again. And it's not a cop-out, and it may sound like that. It's, as long as I make it an issue, then people commenting about me will make it an issue. But if it's not an issue, you have there's no there's no fodder there for you to load your cannon with. So, for example, there was a period there where people referenced me as an affirmative action baby, that if I were not black, no one would know who I was. And I thought that was an interesting comment, but I didn't respond to it because I'd like to think I'm above such levels of, that's getting into the trenches, and I don't have the time, energy, or the interest to fight people in trenches. But what I do know is that as recently as 10 years ago, there were taxis that would not pick me up going north in Manhattan. Harlem is north of where I might have been looking for the taxi. As recently as about 10 years ago. There's still occasionally taxis that don't pick me up, but this is a numerically measurable thing. And so it used to be 2 out of 5 taxis wouldn't pick me up. Now it's 1 out of 10 won't pick me up.
Now, that might be more cosmos than cultural progress.
Well, I thought about that, but I can wear a hat and glasses. I have various disguises. The problem is I can't wear a mustache because I already have a mustache. So it doesn't work as a disguise. So I tried to gauge whether it's Cosmos, and those numbers change smoothly before, during, and after Cosmos. So that's why I'm pretty sure Cosmos did not affect it there. And not only that, there'd be people coming up to me and they say, "Oh, you're the smartest black person I know," or "You should be a role model for the black children," right? I was getting that 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now, that's not what is said. So I want you to be a role model for my kid. And the kid is a blonde white girl, right? And so there has been a real and measurable shift. And I have not made race an issue, and neither has the emergent population who has learned science from me, neither have they made this an issue. And I can say this, one of my great disappointments was I was on stage with Richard Dawkins on a panel, just the two of us. I guess it's not a panel, it's a conversation titled The Poetry of Science. And we were invited by the atheist group at Howard University in Washington, D.C. This is an HBCU, of course, one of the flagship historically black colleges. And one of the objectives there was to explore, well, how come atheism is not as large in the black community? And I said, I don't want to talk about atheism or the black community. Let's just talk about science and let that be the attractive force. Well, we are on the campus of Howard University, a mostly black college, and here's an auditorium with 2,000 people in it. Maybe 5% of the people were black.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I was like, wow, okay, that's interesting.
That's real interesting. Yeah. What percentage of the campus is black?
The last I saw was over 90%. It might even be higher.
But that does seem more. So I understand you didn't want to talk about it, but that does seem worth talking about. I mean, that's because even I knew what to expect there, and even I find that alarming.
Right. So here's another interesting point, and I don't have a good answer. I can make up an answer because I know I can make up a cause because I know the answer, but I don't know if it's the right cause. Atheism in the black community, whatever it's in, I can tell you this, that the church in the black community has not historically been taken a posture regarding science. The church in the black community has been much more a servant of the community. It's been a place where people meet, where they, the bake sales, the whatever, and you don't find the black churches going to change school curriculum, to put one thing in the science curriculum and take other things out. That level, I think people were just worried about trying to get the vote in the South. Sit there and worry about what is being taught in schools. So the religious black community has not historically been anti-science. Let me just put it that way. And so I had less concerns about whether or not you had legions of black atheists running around. It didn't distract me or bother me.
Right. Well, so I totally respect your wanting to essentially proceed as though we live in a colorblind society, or to try to keep a kind of a colorblind bubble around your functioning in our society. But I feel like your silence on this question or on this topic could be misinterpreted. I mean, so basically it could be interpreted as the assertion that either we've achieved enough on the topic of racial inequality, that living as though there's no such thing as race is the only path forward, or the normative path forward? And it may be that it may be that you want to say that. It may be that you're kind of more on that side of the spectrum. And when I think of visible Black writers and commentators who have made noise on this topic, the spectrum is the two extremes. I would put someone like Larry Elder on the one side and Ta-Nehisi Coates on the other, where, so Larry Elder, for those who don't know, is a political commentator mostly, I think his background's as a lawyer, but he more or less says, the affirmative action is purely harmful. We just have to move forward as though the race doesn't exist. We have a Black president, get over it. I mean, I could be doing some injustice to his position, but it's pretty close to that. And then Ta-Nehisi Coates is saying, we should be paying reparations for slavery, and we have made very little progress. And in some sense, having a Black president is merely token progress. And again, I'm almost certainly not doing justice to the nuance of his view there, but it's something quite like that. So those guys are far apart. And when I hear you say, I don't want to talk about race, I just want to talk about science, and I don't want to be the Black scientist, I want to be the scientist, it seems to locate you, I think, just by default, more on the Larry Elder side of this argument, just because you're not choosing to comment on these topics.
Well, when people ask me, I'll comment. I just don't make it part of my platform. I don't say, I'm coming to your city and I'm going to talk about race and sex and injustice. No, that's not what I do. So it's not that I'm afraid to talk about it, or it's just that when I'm given the choice, I don't talk about it because I have so much else to share. I have so much else, so many places to bring people. And there's a comic that I have an original copy of that at first appeared in the New Yorker, where there are four scientists, they're chemists at a laboratory slab, and three of the chemists are white, one is Black. And you see the thought bubbles in each of their heads as you go left to right, and the rightmost scientist is Black. And they're all doing things with their hands. One is looking at a flask, another is noting things in a clipboard, and another is swirling a test tube. So they're clearly busy doing science. But the first thought bubble says, I wonder what he thinks about OJ. But today it might be, I wonder what he thinks about Cosby, right? Okay. The next one is, I wonder what he thinks about affirmative action. The next one is, I wonder what he thinks about Farrakhan. And you look in the Black scientist's head, and there's just equations in his head. Right. Okay. So that is on my wall in my office. And anytime someone says, "Oh, what do you think about affirmative action?" I just point them to that drawing. And so one day I may write about all this, write about what I've been through in my life and what I've overcome and the forces against it. I don't think now is the time. There's an education book in me that will come out, not in the next few years. I've got too much on my plate. But that education book will explore suggestions on how to improve education, how to deal with people who are underprepared or overprepared, or what people have called gifted or not, or should there be inclusion classes. I'm formulating slowly opinions on all of those that I will be putting into a book. But so maybe you'll have to wait 4 years. Invite me back in 4 years and we'll talk all about it.
That will be great. I think that will be a very useful contribution to our conversation, because, frankly, I mean, so you're not afraid to talk about it, but I'm afraid to talk about it. I thought of having Ta-Nehisi Coates on this podcast when I first saw his book, but to some degree, I've just been beaten down by my recent podcast failures to have hard conversations. And so,
well,
I've been
not
humbled.
Another one of your failures. This one.
But I think that conversation probably would go terribly, and for reasons that wouldn't be all my fault, but for reasons which I don't consider myself wise or skillful enough as an interlocutor to contain the damage. And so, yeah, I mean, I would love, the ideal case for me would be to be able to have you on my shoulder helping me with that conversation, because I think the end game for me ultimately is obvious, that we have to get to a colorblind society, right? I mean, so race can't be an important variable morally, intellectually, or any other way that really matters. It's not that it's not a biologically valid concept at all. I mean, that, if you're going to talk about sickle cell anemia, you're talking about a phenotype that is genetically determined, as is, skin color. So it's not that it's not crazy to talk about race, but we have to get to a place where we're just human beings with, various qualities that can be expressed for good or for ill. But how to get there is the challenge. And it's very difficult for a white guy like me to sort of stumble into that conversation, trying to hew to what seems like a very idealistic line that is detached from the day-to-day reality of living as a black man or woman in a society where racism is still an issue. I think you would do a lot of good as an educator blowing out the pipes on that particular topic.
Yeah. But I'm not ready for that yet. But I will be. I don't like going public on something that I've only half baked in my head, because it's irresponsible, actually, especially given the following that I now have. But when that comes out, I would have read everything and I would have formulated it. And if I'm still a little confused, I'll say that candidly. But if I think I've got a pathway, just the way you have, your books are very carefully researched, and I know you're a deep and careful thinker. And so, and I know you're a deep and careful thinker because there are topics that I might have leaned one way or another, and then you present information and evidence that more fleshed out things I hadn't really considered as, yeah, he's got a point. Yeah, all right, I'm with you. Let's do it. Especially when you gave all your long discussion about guns. And I'm a New Yorker, and I, largely anti-gun. I grew up, if you had a gun, you were ready to commit a crime with it. You're not going to shoot pigeons, right? Or, well, we'd love it if you shot pigeons.
You found the best pro-gun argument yet in New York. Yeah, okay. Well, so yeah, and needless to say, when you write that book, and if I still have a podcast, I will bend your arm hard to get you on, because that would be great. But so let's see. We've spoken for more than an hour now, and actually haven't gotten to any of the topics we thought we were going to talk about. So, I
have a few more minutes if you want to hit them quickly or succinctly.
Well, there's a nice segue here to the topic you emailed me about.